Welcome to the IT Experience podcast. We're here to guide IT and global business services professionals in navigating experience management, focusing on how to optimize budgets and drive better business outcomes. Join us as we discuss the trends, tools, and strategies with top industry experts that are transforming the future of service delivery in large enterprises. This podcast is brought to you by Happy Signals, the leading experience management platform for IT and global business services.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Signals podcast once again. Today we are going to be speaking with Jaro Tomik from CDW, who is the chief technologist there and has been now for years been working with companies that are looking to improve the employee experience with IT services. But I'll let him introduce himself a little bit more in detail himself, after which we will jump into today's conversation around experience management, but also something very interesting, which is scenario-based workshops. We'll find out about that a little bit more very soon. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for that, Sakari. Jaro Tomik. I've been at CDW now for over 4 years. It's hard to believe, actually. The time just flies by real quick. And my job is to ultimately look at the market in the areas of enterprise service management and intelligent automation, and continuously look for the new up-and-coming vendors, but also look at the existing players in the market, look at the shifts in there, look at the likes of Gartner, Forrester, but also on a daily basis speak to a subset of our 8,500 customers to understand whether the technologies and the vendors and their marketing departments, what they promote, is that actually being reflected in the real world environments? Are the customers seeing the value? How easy or difficult is it to get value out of those different technologies? And how much process and cultural change is required in and around that? What sort of support they offer? So really just trying to get a realistic view on the market and be able to advise our customers, but also our sellers internally, and educate them on, how this market operates and how we can best help our customers move their maturity forward.
Okay. Actually, I hadn't planned on asking this question, but I'll throw you a curveball straight off the bat.
Love a curveball.
So in the last 4 years, is there maybe a couple of major things that you have seen change in the market in terms of your area of expertise that you think have been notable changes?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, pick only a two. That might be the curveball, really. But I would say, from my perspective, and this has not been teed up as you mentioned, but for me, it's two things. Obviously, AI, right? Because every vendor has picked up on that, and they now call AI even what 4 or 5 years ago would be unthinkable to call AI. So really, that huge shift, and the customer struggling to navigate the market and thinking, okay, well, if everything is AI now, which one is actually good? Because they all call it the same. And even like in the AI ops market, and I'm going off on a tangent a little bit here, but even in the AI ops market, if you look at all of the different vendors' websites, whether they're from service management background or observability background, security background, pure AI ops, if you remove the colors and you remove couple of the words, they're all the same. Right? So how is the customer supposed to make sense out of that? So that's one part, is that whole AI washing of everything in service management. And the second part to me is experience management. This is what I meant. We didn't tee it up, but for me, that's like a huge shift where that application of human-centered design has made its way into pretty much all of the conversations that we're having lately, and really trying to help our customers navigate the space and make sure that they are able to ultimately understand, how do I make sure that the purpose of IT, the purpose of my job within the organization, which in official terms is delivering business value, but in more realistic term, what we're talking about is, how do I make the services I deliver better for the people that I serve, the employees or maybe external customers? How do I make that better? That is really the key question. And without the application of human-centered design, without having those sensors out there, having that visibility, understanding of how their devices perform, how they feel, how they service quality they receive, without having all of that data together and having that automatically processed, it's really difficult to get a handle on which projects should those companies prioritize. And this is the two major shifts I'm seeing. So AI and the human-centered design application on service management.
So, I mean, you are also selling. So this is a business for you to like guide people through this. So how do you then like get the trust from the companies that in this all of this confusion, all of this AI washing, and vendors having a very similar message for different things, how do you make sure that people actually get what they're buying and that they are able to prioritize the right initiatives?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess the key thing is try to reduce all of the nonsense that's being said out there. I think it's literally just that. My what I'm trying to do in my role, where I see my value to anybody else I speak to on a daily basis, is trying to just reduce the BS and ultimately just understand what is actually happening, what is actually delivered, what is these people can get out of it as an investment. That is really the core of what I see my role being, and communicating that back. And I think the reception has been really positive, because I'm not afraid to call vendors out on some of the things that they do, or it's taken 18 months to deliver any value. We live in and I talk about this a lot in our sessions with customers. We live in this VUCA world, right? It's constantly changing. The pace of change is increasing. The whole market is pretty volatile, and that's even before we get into any politics, right? Just the IT market is really complex, and it's evolving extremely fast. For customers to be able to react to this, to be agile enough, to be resilient enough and react to the changes, is really difficult. So I think in terms of who should they trust, who can they trust, I guess it's just people who are able to cut through the noise and
Yeah.
help them navigate the market, help them point them into several solutions that are most applicable to the organization that they work in terms of its size, in terms of its vertical, in terms of aims, that what it is trying to do. And if you can pull that together, having the understanding of what technologies they have, if you pull the information together actually, and you understand the market, you're then able to suggest to them the solutions where they're likely to see the most value, and then they still have that freedom of choice. But the key thing that I'm trying to avoid is telling the customers, oh yeah, well, you should really look at such and such trends, and then the customer goes into the market and everybody talks about zero tickets and agentic AI, and now I'm starting seeing pop-ups of preparing organization for quantum computing revolution support. It's like, what? We don't even have trusted CMDBs yet. Like, come on, guys! Like, really, let's have our feet on the ground for a bit here. So I think it's that, right?
Okay.
It really is really ensuring that customers can navigate the market faster and better, and knowing what they're doing is going to pay off soon. That is the key thing.
Yeah, this is actually fun because now I can see that you can take a curveball and you can take sort of this non-teed up question. So I'm going to take this interview in a completely different direction than what you thought. Let's see how it goes. But so you talked about confusion because of this like different messaging. And then you also said that like reflected in the real world environment, a realistic view. And you talked about VUCA, and VUCA, for those who don't know it, is an acronym that stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a term that has been around for probably a decade or so now, but it's for sure that it's just becoming more common. And then you talked about cut through the noise. And when I look at these different themes, I'm thinking this is about the gap between what is being stated and the real world reality that customers would be facing. And now we get back to the topic workshops, doing scenario based workshops. You have been using this to great success in order to actually get people to think about these things in a real world type of way, in a safe environment where the mistakes that they might be doing or the choices that they make won't have a negative or positive impact, but they get to see what it might be like once they move into the real world and can't afford to make mistakes in the same way. So can you tell us a little bit like what makes you excited about these workshops and what's the point of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll link that to the recap as well. You mentioned that VUCA world, and I think it's becoming increasingly difficult for us as humans individually to even keep up with technology.
Yeah.
And you and we are living that tech world. We have the technology around us. We have it at our disposal. We're seeing kind of where the industry is going, where it's moving. We have access to potentially exciting technologies, new laptops, phones, and stuff like that. And Yet when you join an organization, you still see things being quite behind the curve of what we get in our personal lives, which can be frustrating, especially for younger people joining the organizations, thinking these guys are so behind and getting frustrated with all the different limitations that the laptops and phones have to offer in terms of zero security, right? So there is all of that. And at the same time, all the technology leaders are pushed to bring, so not only bring in the latest technology, like I just talked about, but also secure the organization and also react to all the changes in the market. It's really difficult. And this is where what we're trying to do is get about 25, 30 people in a room for the day. Some people have, I didn't think of it this way, but when we got feedback from people, they called it's like an escape room for IT. And I love that because that's literally what it is. You throw people in a room, you split them into different roles, ideally the ones they're not too familiar with. So let's say there's the roles of CIO, CFO, head of technology transformation. Then you've got service center, so kind of like your service desk. You've got operations, and you've got your project team, so your developers and testers. And the idea is, as you split them into those roles, they inherit this really poorly running retail business that needs to operate, needs to make money, support in store, support also online, and it's kind of a mess. It's a chaos. It's a pretty unorganized chaos in the first time they run this, and they've got 3 attempts to make the organization better. So what they need to do as teams, they need to get together and basically take it from chaos to an optimized state.
Okay. So I'm gonna get back to one point. You said that you put the people into roles that they are not their own. Why do you do that?
So the reason for that is, one, it's a bit more fun when you put a CIO on a service desk and when you also put, let's say, a business analyst into the role of a CIO, because suddenly they start gaining more empathy for the other side, right? If I can call it that way. So that's one part. The more interesting part is, if you are, for example, from a development background, and we put your role in a developer, you will actually experience things you're very familiar with, which is good. But you won't really get the opportunity to try something new, to get out of your mindset. You will very much still be with the blinkers on your eyes, like the horses, right? And you will not be able to really step out from the process enough to be able to see it end to end. And I think this is the beauty of it, is the simulations are fantastic for people to take a day out of the office, and they're so stuck in the rut of doing similar things day in, day out again. This enables them to get the bigger picture and actually have a look at, are the things that we're doing truly meaning sense? Am I speaking enough with the people to the left and right of my process? Am I providing my organization, or am I provided from my organization with the vision, with the understanding, with the clarity? Are we enabling each other to be as agile, as resilient, as secure as possible? Those are the sort of questions I want people to take away from it.
And this is interesting because if you put the CIO in the service desk agent's position and somebody, for example, a service desk agent in the CIO's position, which role tends to be harder to, or let's say that in which one of those two do you tend to see that the empathy for the difficulties of that specific role, where's the gap closed the most? Is the CIO understanding, this is the reality of service desk, or is it the service desk agents that see I didn't realize that the CIO job was like this?
I think in this instance, it works pretty much the same way. I would say they both get roughly the same amount out of it. But I'll tell you a story that's slightly from a different side, which is when I was delivering a simulation in Australia. This is now before COVID. So I think it was December 2019.
Yeah.
I was in Australia. It was so strange also because they had all these Christmas decorations and it was 36 degrees outside Celsius. It was mad. But anyways, aside from that, it was fantastic because we had a full room of IT people or technology people. So all different areas, and they absolutely loved the workshop. There was one person from outside of IT, a marketing lady. Yeah. And she was a slightly bigger lady and she was very enthusiastic about the workshop.
Yeah.
By the second round, she was, and I'm not even kidding, breathing heavily, running around the room, red in her face. Like, she was like really into the workshop. She was trying to make the best job possible. And she was on service desk.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because we did the review of the second round. And I always ask people like, how did that feel? How was that for you? And normally I start with the CIO and CTO and the CFO. But this time I went straight to her. I was like, look, I need to break the process here a little bit. I can see, this has been a pretty intense round for you. How did that make you feel? And she was like, Jaro, in front of the whole team in here, I swear to you, on my children, I will never ever shout at anybody at service desk ever again. This is the hardest job in the world, right? And at that point, I thought, you know what, mission accomplished, because what we have started to build is that empathy between the business and IT, starting to understand each other's perspectives. Last week, I delivered this to a single organization, an architect company, and a similar situation happened where they had several people in the room from around the business. And it was all about, well, IT is driving this big change, bringing new technologies in. They need the business users to understand what's happening, why it's happening, how they need to start collaborating, communicating, and really start creating those channels through which they can understand each other's point of view and start helping each other, rather than sometimes, quite often, especially if IT and HR, working against each other rather than together, for example, on things like joiners, movers, levers. And what we tend to see is more finger pointing and kicking things over the wall to the other side and blaming each other. We're trying to move away from that and make the teams understand, in the end, you're all trying to do the same thing. Your employees less frustrated, happier, ultimately, and productive. That's all we're all trying to do, just in different language.
Yeah. And if that was her sentiment, do you think that if you would ask service desk agents around the world that are doing this job, and it is a job that doesn't get the appreciation and the credit that it deserves. I mean, we see even from our benchmark data that out of the areas that impact the overall experience with IT in an organization, IT support is the highest and most important one, because most of the time technology works well and then you don't really notice it. But the moment you have an incident, it's an interruption to your work and you want it to be fixed accurately, fast, etc. So what would you say that service desk agents, one thing they would want a regular business user to understand about their reality?
I would say one thing they would like them to understand is most of the calls, by the time they get on a call with the end user, by that time, typically the end users are really frustrated, are typically stressed out, need help really quick. Because we know in organizations, a lot of shadow IT happening, things like that, only half of the time people actually raise tickets. So by the time, not just raise the ticket that may have been resolved without even a direct phone call, but by the time they're on a phone call or they run up to a kiosk in the office or whatever else, these people are usually pretty frustrated. And I think what the end users need to understand, this is a really tough job. Like you said, it's emotionally draining, and there should be a little bit more respect, if that's the right word, towards that role. You're getting these tough calls, and it's one after another, and that's, I think, something that often the business don't appreciate, because they see it so much from their own individual point of view. And that's fair, right? We're all people. We all want to get on with our lives as quickly as possible. Most of the time, it won't be that service desk agent's fault individually, right? It will be some sort of other thing breaking down. So just treating them more as a partner in crime, somebody to help, somebody to collaborate with, to get them back to productivity, rather than looking at them as somebody you can just shout at and relieve your stress. Even though that's part of the job, they kind of should be paid as psychologists in a way sometimes, right?
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you mentioned that, like, by the time that people contact, because that in a way, in the happy signals, that I don't usually like to do any product plugs, but we measure the perceived lost time. So how much people get to answer, how much time did I lose with this problem? Like you said, that the problem might have started much earlier. So in that sense, like the traditional IT metrics that measure only from the moment when that ticket is open actually doesn't capture the struggle and the time lost due to this issue before the ticket gets opened. And then at the same time, like when it comes to perceived lost time versus measured lost time on the like technical or operational metrics, that's also the thing that people don't stop working for all kinds of problems. If we are, for example, recording this in a software called Riverside, but if this wouldn't have worked, we could have just switched over to Teams. It wouldn't have stopped us from doing the recording. But at the same time, if I'm in a strictly governed process where every single step needs to be completed until the next step can begin, then every single minute that I'm not able to work will be impacting my ability to work. Anyways, end of off topic, back to the workshops.
Yeah, I think what's been really incredible for us is the introduction that I've worked on with Sunburst Simulations, with the company that develops these workshops. Working with them on the latest edition, and the two massive changes we have made. There's a lot of small ones, but the two big changes is we have introduced a roadmap where the participants get to actually see the full 3-year project. It's like a 3-year roadmap for the organization, getting them from the technologies they have right now to the next level and taking it to kind of the extreme of everything working perfectly well, and a lot of the tasks and workflows automated. And that's beautiful because right from the get-go, they know where they're going, that the vision is clear. And that makes a huge difference because in a lot of organizations, they don't even have that vision defined or having everybody bought into it, right? So I think that's one key change that we've introduced that makes a huge difference to how the workshop works. And the second part is the introduction of some of the latest trends and topics. So we have a lot of conversations around AI ops and introducing that AI into the operational environment to reduce noise, to help create automated workflows, and then enable the organization to self-heal based on the knowledge they already have, and all of those good things. The second one, which is relevant obviously to this podcast, is the introduction of experience management and employee experience measurement. So we're talking about the 3 types of data. So the technology data, the experience data, and the operational data, so that we really cover the SLAs, XLAs, and understand the different experiences people are having from their devices. And only then, when we bring those 3 types of data together in that simulation, are the teams able to make truly well qualified data based decisions on which projects to prioritize. And that's, I think, one of the key mind shifts in the room. That's when the light bulbs go off, is when the leaders in the room, and we typically have, if it's a combined audience of different customers, you have literally the CIOs, CTOs, head of technology, head of operations, head of infrastructure, even the head of experience. We had once head of AI and automation, right? So pretty high up people. That's when they realize, when I see this overall in the simulation with all of the different departments involved, we actually, unlike in the simulation where it's all in the room and you can very easily gather information about what's going on, in real life, they don't have the visibility. That's still the absolutely key attribute that companies are missing, that's preventing them from moving forward faster, being able to react faster, and being able to apply automation and AI on the visibility data that they have just gained.
And why isn't that visibility in data there? I mean, these organizations, they already have all of this available, but what's hindering the visibility?
I think there's two areas. There is the interoperability. Just generally, the integrations in the past have been pretty difficult. And even if you build them, they tend to break as you make changes on either side of the equation between the two platforms or more. There's the battle of the departments for budgets and power, and this whole political thing that goes on that also makes it slightly more difficult. But I would say even more basic than that, it's just not realizing the importance of data until now. Until now, the departments could get by and hide with self-reporting on SLAs and pretty much getting that watermelon effect that you guys talk about a lot as well, right? So the green SLAs on the outside, whether that's external service provider or internal. But in fact, as you said, the end user experience begins potentially at a really bad place already weeks before they have raised the ticket, and maybe even when the IT feel like they have closed the ticket already and they tick a box because they resolved it from their point of view in 6 hours, it might still not work for the end user. Then they have to raise another ticket and go back into the queue and the timer starts, right? So having that watermelon effect really is what makes people, or explanation of it, makes people realize they don't have the data. And if you don't have the data, you will not have enough information to process and leverage in the age of automation and AI. And I
Yeah.
think that that is the key message that people are getting out of this is we currently don't have the visibility, and we can no longer get by as an IT department self-reporting and not having the access to the data.
Okay. I'm thinking here because the having that roadmap, it's really interesting, like 3-year plan roadmap. When organizations they work, a lot of times we get stuck into this busy work where it feels like we're doing a lot, but we're not contributing to that common goal. What's the role of data? Like if we go into database decisions, like what's the role of data in solving for busy work? Because now you said that there was a roadmap. Like why was the roadmap brought into the simulation?
Yeah. So the reason is because it's good to have a plan in general, right? Knowing for everybody to know where we're heading, why we're heading there, and what is the organization trying to do. To move forward. And it's also that also enables us to not just have that vision and understanding and clarity about where the organization's heading and feeling a little bit of comfort of we're going into a better place. So there is that part contributing to talent retention, right? Because people are like, well, we're not just doing this randomly. Somebody has a plan, which is always a good thing to have.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think there's two parts to this that popped into my head when you talked about it. One part is when you have a plan, you're then able to say, okay, we have a certain roadmap, but we know the conditions will change. Competitors will come up with something new that we need to react to. New technologies will come in. People will leave. People will enter the organization. There will be change. We might get a cyber attack or something like that, right? We will acquire another company in a more positive way. So these changes will happen and the roadmap will change. It's just about having that goal or set of goals that we're aiming towards that helps the organization to understand, okay, whatever I'm doing, how much or is it contributing towards that end goal where the organization is going? Are we focusing on the key projects? Are we focusing on the right things? And coincidentally, not so much coincidentally, it's very intentional, but this is also what happens in the simulation. In the round one, these developers are fitting Tetris pieces into shapes and they are feeling like they're doing such a good job. You know, they're like working really hard. So sort of like the stereotypical scenario of having headphones on and trying to work out this code. When they work out the code, it takes them, let's say, 10, 15 minutes out of the 25. And then at the end of the round, we pull up a Gantt chart, which shows how long different departments took to resolve their tasks. And I asked the developers, how was that for you? And they're like, oh, this was absolutely amazing. We smashed it. We like delivered all of this code and we were so busy and it was just great. And then I pull up the Gantt chart and guess what? 23 minutes it took them to, on average, to get product from being approved by the CIO all the way to live, right? And 20 minutes of that is development. In the simulation, right? Of course, that's not 100% reflective of real life, but the idea there is they feel like they're doing a great job. They feel like they're contributing. They're working so hard, yet they're the biggest bottleneck. And again, it all comes down to the visibility. If you don't have the visibility, if you don't have the Gantt charts, if you don't understand where your bottlenecks are, it's really difficult, even for the individual contributors, to understand, is my time at work? And we need to remember we spend more time at work than sleeping and then with our family. Is my time at work really well spent? Am I contributing to my best ability, but also am I enabled to do best job possible in the organization?
Yeah. Now that's really interesting because the thing is that some of these aspects have been around for decades. And Peter Drucker, for example, in his book, The Effective Executive, already in the 60s was speaking about how any knowledge worker's contribution to the organization is upward contribution. How does my work contribute to the bigger goals of the organization? And now we have all this technology and we have all these different ways of being able to communicate. What's the second round then? What happens in the second round when the developers understand that they might be the bottleneck for velocity?
I guess there's two things that can happen, and I had one happen this week on Tuesday in Manchester, and one happened last week in London. Right, so it's actually it was the two extremes. So one extreme last week in London was that the teams did pretty badly in round one, and what I found over time, the worse you do in round one, the better you tend to do in round three. Because people really get this urgency of like, oh, we've really messed up in here. This was proper chaos. Like, we need to get better. And they start applying changes, like introducing first versions of AI ops that starts reducing the noise. They do an update on their enterprise service management platform. They start introducing more sort of observability rather than just monitoring, right? So all of these little changes, and there's about 10 of those that they will introduce in round two. They will also do things like, and I don't want to give up too much, obviously, because I would still like people to experience it, but there will be some changes in the way the room is organized physically, where people sit, how they collaborate. We're looking at the process improvement and stuff like that. But also one of the key things is introduction of automated processing of the feedback data, both qualitative and quantitative. In round one, they're given a task to do all of that manually. They're giving a lot of feedback, and they're getting which application it relates to and what was the sentiment and how much time did the individual user wasted, but they have to process it manually on service desk. So the service desk agent, instead of trying to log and resolve tickets or pass them over, what they do is they go through heaps of feedback, and it's really annoying, and it takes them a lot of time, and it takes them the whole round to work it out. Whilst in round two, where they're given the automated processing, they're just getting the sentiment results. They're getting the numbers. And that means that using automation really well, because instead of them wasting time having that value leakage on manual processing, in round two, they're actually able to focus on putting those improvements in place. Yeah. And that really is, for me, the whole point of this automation game that we've been in since I think humans existed, industrial revolution, everything else, right? But now it's getting really intense. And this is a great example of that.
And so they get that done. And there's the roadmap. Like, without giving away too much, like you said, what happens then in round three that sort of like is the culmination and move into the best state possible?
Well, I would say round one is about realization, kind of within the chaos. How can we make it more organized? Yeah. In round two, when you're more organized and you have the visibility, you start understanding, okay, how can we be smarter about the data that we have at our disposal to make it truly work for our organization, rather than, let's say if you have a pretty bad CMDB or pretty bad knowledge base, rather than it working against the organization. And that really is what third round is about. We can trust our data. We can trust our team. We understand what we're doing. And in round three, we're taking that to the next level. In this area in particular, it's towards that zero ticket future. That really is what we're talking about. Because 10 years ago, if you ask somebody what is zero ticket, they would say, well, what we're doing in our service management is we're trying to relieve the pressure from the service desk agents. So for us, zero ticket means that there's no tickets getting through to service desk because we're resolving everything through our portal, and we've switched off the email and we've switched off the phones, and everybody's going through portal and everybody's very happy. Well, we know that failed spectacularly, because the portal's first question they had typically was, dear end user, and that can be somebody completely IT illiterate, right? Do you have an incident or a request? At which point the end user is like, what is that? And just clicking random buttons because they don't know what that means. It's just a complete language disconnect. What's changed now is we're actually able to interact in a much smarter, sophisticated way. And we're able to understand that zero ticket should not be about the agents not getting any tickets. Because what I say a lot lately is, if the end user has to raise a ticket, you have already failed them. That's how I see the world. The IT has failed their end users, right? If they have already experienced issues and are so desperate that they have to reach out to service desk. So I think that's where I see the mind shift, where zero ticket suddenly means, again, that human-centered design. It means from the point of view of the end user receiving that service. So that means actually, in fact, the service desk becomes then more busy as they get more visibility, they get more tickets. We rationalize them with AI ops and everything else. But really, the agents are busy. They're just busy in a different way. And through automation and AI, they're receiving much more curated information. And the beauty of it is when you have that information, when you have the analytics, you can do incredibly smart things like, Sakari, you've had your new laptop for the last 4 months, and I can see it's booting twice as slow as anybody else's laptop. Would you like us to have a look at it? Or things like, okay, you've had your laptop for 3 years already, and we can also see it's now below par performance compared to the rest of the organization. Would you like to prefer to stick to your device for another year and maybe get a £10 Amazon voucher? Or do you want us to change your device, which will cost the organization £1,000 or something, right? But ultimately, the choice is with the end user. They did not have to go out of their way to raise a ticket because IT already knew who they were, what devices they had, what is their experience. We're able to pull that data together, automatically raise a ticket for that agent to proactively, or virtual agent, to proactively reach out and ask those questions to the end user, which means we have saved productivity time of the end user. That's where the industry needs to go right now.
Yeah. And if you look at the simulation, then like in the context of the simulation, you have the first one is about getting organized. The second part is about doing smarter work. And if I understood it correctly, the third part is about automation then. Is that it? Okay.
I think it's about, the third part is about experiencing the benefits of well applied automation and AI. That is the third round. That's the optimized state where we have really leveraged the visibility, the data, the process improvements we've made. We've leveraged much more of the technology we had at our disposal, and we can massively accelerate the improvements. Even to your previous question that we had there, the team in London, did pretty poorly in round one, but did really well in round 2 and 3. Then the team this week did pretty well in round one, actually way above average, but then they had a J curve because they started improving their processes and they started introducing all these new ideas that they had. And that's fantastic. But what it made actually is people started try to get adjusted to these new processes, and it slowed them down. And that's normal, right? But it's just beautiful to see how every organization will be slightly different. The main point is, as long as you have that vision, the understanding, the clarity, you have the roadmap, and you have some sort of scope to adjust to the ever-changing environments, you know where you're going. And both teams got to round 3, got to leverage the automation and AI, and got to really experience the journey. And I think that's the beauty of it, because this is exactly reflective of the real world environment.
And how important is it that it's an external person doing it?
And I think it can be done by an internal person too. However, there is always this in every organization, when somebody does something from internal perspective, there's always like some sort of lack of trust. This is what I'm hearing from the leaders. They're like, well, I've been telling this to them for 2 years. But now that I have somebody external coming in and actually explaining this, providing the experience, even if I sponsor it as a tech leader, then suddenly they believe it. And it's just this strange human thing, I think, where like as long as it's internal, it's political, it's a fight, it's this struggle for your place in the organization. But sometimes it helps when you are trying to push certain agenda, and then somebody external comes in and actually does pretty much the same thing. It just helps to add the gravitas to it.
Okay. So if somebody's wondering, and as we wrap this up, if somebody's wondering, should we do this? Maybe from that last comment, I would say that maybe you should, in case you feel like these principles that we talked about today sound like common sense, but for some reason, the message hasn't gotten through, you haven't gotten the buy-in from the organization. Maybe that's a good point then to say, all right, let's bring in somebody external to run a workshop. Let's do the simulation so that we get that empathy and everyone understands the importance and the urgency of actually working better with better organized ways, in smarter ways, and also to get to the point where they can experience the benefits of automation and AI.
Absolutely. This is how the workshop was originally designed. It's designed for C-suite to be able to gain buy-in of people around them. That is literally the purpose of the workshop. But it's just beautiful how everything else happens in and around that, and seeing the light bulbs go off in the room and just seeing them work in a completely new way just by being able to step out of the process. And I think for the most of the people in the room, that's their key takeaway is don't just get stuck in the day-to-day. Try to think a bit harder about what's happening around you and the purpose, why you're there as a department, as an individual. What are you contributing? How much are you contributing? And how can you help yourself and others do better? That is kind of like a really, I think, nice way to summarize it.
Yeah, and then we shall summarize it like that. Thank you for coming to the podcast today, Jaro, and I will put the links to the workshop that you run and to your LinkedIn profile. Jaro does share a lot of things on LinkedIn, so follow him and check out the workshop. And I'm supposed that like you, just like me, are just happy when people reach out and happy to have conversations around these topics.
100%. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun as always. Yeah, I'm looking forward to us meeting up again, potentially at that workshop in October.
Potentially so. So, and as we always finish the podcast, we wish you in the audience to stay happy and to stay safe.
If you liked this episode, please give us thumbs up, rating, or share it with your colleagues to help others learn about this topic as well. To learn more, go to happysignals.com.